Hi, thanks to the Christian Union for inviting me to speak this evening. My name is Jemima Howell, and I work with Christian unions just like this one, helping students engage with the bigger and important questions of life. And so this evening, we're going to be looking at real peace. And I'd like to start with a question. When you're struggling with turmoil, uncertainty, and frustration, where do you find peace? Peace as in peace of mind, rest from anxiety and stress, peace from questions like, will I be able to get a job after graduation? When will I be able to see my friends properly? Where do you find peace? Maybe it's going for a walk with your mum, or spending time on your hobbies, crochet or yoga or baking, something like this evening, or Snapchatting your best friend. Where do you find peace? One thing that I turn to when I feel stressed and anxious is Netflix. I am a pro at distracting myself with TV. Have you ever felt the need to distract yourself too? Even though I think that's what so many of us turn to, it's not always effective, is it? Or even healthy. We aren't dealing with the issue, we're not facing the issue, we're just ignoring it. We aren't learning how to cope in the new environment. And the mental escapism that Netflix provides, let's be honest, it doesn't last forever. The series that you're binging comes to an end, or when you're alone in the evening in the shower with your thoughts, it all comes flooding back. Well, if coping by ignoring stuff isn't really that great, what's the official advice for finding peace in the midst of chaos? So-Young Kim, an American counseling psychologist from Brown University, deals with this in his blog. He says that we have to learn to shift our focus, to stop thinking about the future because that's overwhelming, but thinking about the now. He even recommends that we schedule in worry time in our day, where you let your worries overwhelm you for a set amount of time and then stop as soon as the time is up. Just not thinking about it is easier said than done, though. I know I'm not that good at just stopping my worries when my worry time is up. And what if it's your now that's anxiety inducing? What if maybe you think that you have good reason to be anxious? Well, I don't know about you, but I love a dramatic true story. Buckle up. Have you ever heard of a woman called Tammy Oldham Ashcraft? She was 23 years old when her and her fiance set on a boat headed to San Diego. But they ended up sailing straight into Hurricane Raymond. It doesn't immediately sound super threatening with a name like Raymond, I'll be honest, but this hurricane was devastating. Under the full force of the storm, the boat became a wreck, and her fiance was lost at sea forever. But Tammy Ashcraft took together the remains of the boat and set sail for land. She survived on nothing but peanut butter for 41 days, living the true student lifestyle. If you were alone at sea, in the middle of a hurricane, would you appreciate it if someone told you to stop worrying, to be more positive, to think about the now instead of the future? No, what you need, what you want is to not be in that situation. You want someone to help you, maybe an experienced sailor who can help you navigate the storm, or better still, for there not to be a storm at all. Maybe somehow you haven't really struggled with anxiety or stress recently. Maybe you don't really feel like you need peace. Maybe you agree with Kim that it's best to just not think about it. If that's you, I'm really, really happy that you aren't struggling at the moment. But I'd like to remind you that Our desire for peace isn't a new thing. Our longing for peace in chaos has been exaggerated by the pandemic, but it didn't begin with COVID. It's a part of being human. In illness, bereavement, and failure, in the middle of hardship and difficulty, where can we find real peace? Well, I think firstly, our longing for real peace is a sign that there is real peace to be found. If not, why would we long for it? It's like having cheap advent calendar chocolate and longing for a sustainable, fair trade, organic, tasty bar. Maybe we've known glimpses of real peace or heard that other people have it and want it for ourselves. But how can we get real peace? We may not be physically sailing into Hurricane Raymond, but it can definitely feel like we are right there in the middle of a storm. How can we have peace? Well, we're going to be spending some time this evening looking at another dramatic real life story with a slightly happier ending than Tammy's. This one is much older and it involves Jesus, his followers, and a boat in the middle of the storm. It's been recorded in multiple historical accounts of Jesus' life, but the one we'll be looking at today is from a biography of Jesus written by a follower called Mark. It was written maybe 30 years or so after Jesus' death. Let's set the scene. It's been a long day of Jesus teaching and a huge crowd listening. You should be able to follow along with the text that appears on the screen. Let's start by the little 35 at the top of the screen. That day when evening came, he, that's Jesus, said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first read this, I had no idea what squall meant. Apparently, a squall is a sudden violent gust of wind or localized storm. Basically, not brilliant news for being on a boat. Just like Tammy and her fiance, these guys are in serious danger. How would you feel if you were in this situation? How do you think Jesus and his followers felt in that situation? Regret? Fear? Panic even? Well, let's see how they responded. We'll start now at the little number 38. So the storm is raging on. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we've drowned?" Well, we've got two types of people here, right? We've got the disciples, Jesus' followers. They're panicking. They think they're going to die. They're worried that the waves will literally overwhelm their boat and there's nothing they can do to stop it. Their reaction is understandable. I know that's how I'd react. And earlier on in the biography, we learn that several of them were actually fishermen. They sailed for a living. They knew their stuff. They were able to recognize danger when they saw it. These guys knew that they could die. And they look over at Jesus and he's asleep. Doesn't he care if they drown? They ask. How on earth has Jesus got this peace? A storm is raging around him and he's sleeping. It doesn't really seem normal. How has he got this peace? Well, the next bit in the passage has the answer. Let's start at the little number 39. Jesus got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." How was Jesus able to sleep at a time like this? Well, he had peace, knowing that he had power over the storm, that he could order the wind and the waves to peace, and that they would obey him. He stops the storm with a few words: "Quiet, be still." Imagine you were there on that boat, thinking that any moment could be your last. And you wake up your sleeping friend and say, "Don't you care if we drown?" And then he gets up and he tells the wind and the waves, "Quiet, be still." And it actually works. 1 second, a raging storm, and then completely calm. The wind and the waves obey him. How would you respond? I'd be freaking out. I'd be asking the same question that Jesus' followers did. Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Well, the passage says that they were filled with great fear. They were in shock after what they'd just seen Jesus do. No mere human has power to do something like that. So they were probably thinking to themselves, who is Jesus? Who is this friend of ours standing right there in front of us? Who has that kind of authority? How about the one who created the winds and the waves in the first place? You see, this isn't the only time something like this happens in the accounts of Jesus' life. In all of the accounts, Jesus is constantly doing things beyond what a normal human can do. And he pairs these actions of his with really bold claims that he makes about himself. He claims time and time again to be God, and his actions are evidence that he told the truth. Of course, a regular human couldn't stop a storm with a few words. But if Jesus was God, is God, then why wouldn't he be able to? It makes sense that he'd have the power to do something like that, doesn't it? His disciples clearly believed him, for one. Years after his death, many of them died, spreading their eyewitness testimonies about who Jesus was. They believed that Jesus was the Son of God to the point of death. Of course, it is up to you what you think about Jesus' claim. But for a couple of minutes, suppose that Jesus really is God come to earth as a human. Does it matter? What would it mean for us? Maybe you're thinking, good for Jesus. He had peace because he had control over his situation. I'd have peace too if all I needed to do was say a few words and my problems were over. Well, imagine for a moment that you're a follower of Jesus back then, and this same scenario happened a week later. The disciples and Jesus were on another boat in the middle of a storm, but this time there's a difference. This time, you know that Jesus has control over the wind and the waves. You don't know why he doesn't tell the wind and the waves to stop sooner, but you know him. You know he cares for you. You know he's your friend, and you know that your life is in his hands. Would you have more peace that second time than the first time? Look at what Jesus says to them after silencing the storm. Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? What's he saying here? He's saying that if his followers really knew who Jesus was, then they wouldn't be afraid. If they understood the power and authority of their close friend, they wouldn't be afraid even in the storm because they had him on board. By knowing the one who has ability to bring peace to the storm, they can have peace in the storm. And the same is true for us today, for you and I. By knowing Jesus, by following him, by trusting in him, we can have peace in the midst of chaos. What exactly does this peace look like? Well, it can look like a lot of different things. I know that in my life over the past year, peace from knowing Jesus and following him has been an unexpected and inexplicable sense of calm in some of my lowest moments, after I've been distressed and anxious. And like the disciples in the boat, I've cried out, "Don't you care that this is happening to me?" Because the one who brought peace to the storm can bring me peace of mind. Because Jesus does care that the storm is happening. From a place of peace, he helped his disciples know peace and rescued them. So peace from following Jesus also looks like being in a position to share peace too. Helping someone when you're not in a great place yourself is really, really hard. It's difficult. It can feel like you just don't have the capacity for it. Being grounded in the peace that comes from Jesus enables us to help others who don't have that peace. Are you grounded in peace? Do you want to be? I want to suggest too that our search for peace indicates a deeper peace issue. That when Jesus calmed the storm for his followers, it was just a glimpse, a taste of the peace that he was going to give them. What if we need a deeper type of peace? What if the peace we all need but don't know we're looking for is peace with God? Peace with the Creator who made us. We've turned away from him. There's a rift between us that needs to be fixed. But how? Ultimately, that's the sort of peace that Jesus came to bring. He came to fix the rift so that we might know peace with God. James Bunyan talked yesterday about how we can know true fulfillment in being forgiven from all we've done wrong. This evening, I want to add that we can know real peace by knowing the peace bringer. Peace in our situations, yes, to some extent, but more importantly, peace between us and God. How? How? One of the most important ways that Jesus brings peace we'll be looking at Thursday evening in the talk Crucifixion. I'd thoroughly recommend you watching that talk when it comes out. This has been a sort of part one, if you like, and Thursday evening will definitely be a part two of Real Peace. We'll be looking at how the death and resurrection of Jesus completed his quest to bring peace to his followers. We'll find out what it means for us and what practical difference it can make in our lives. I'd love for you to come along on Thursday evening too. It's going to be a brilliant night. Now, I don't know what you're thinking here tonight. Maybe you feel like you're in a storm that shows no signs of stopping. Maybe you desperately want real peace in your life. Maybe you're starting to see that if Jesus is who he says he is, then he can provide us peace and he is big enough to trust in. Perhaps you're even starting to think that he might be God. If this is you, then please don't go off this Zoom call tonight without your questions answered. Can I encourage you to keep exploring this? Keep searching for peace. Find something that really works, not just helps you ignore the problem. I'm convinced that trusting in Jesus brings a peace that you can't find anywhere else. Please do chat this through tonight with the friend who invited you to watch it. And if you weren't brought along by a friend, then do drop the CU a message in one of their social medias. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you and love to arrange someone to chat through this stuff with you. Perhaps, though, you are kind of disinterested by everything that I've said. You just came for the craft. Well, if that's you, thanks for coming and thanks for listening. Let me leave you, though, with a question to mull over. Where do you turn to for peace? And does it actually give you enough? Thanks for listening, guys. I'm going to hand over to the Christian Union hosts now.